John, Mick, and Tim here. We have another episode of Broken and Unreadable. We got a good one today. I've been looking forward to this for many years, even before this was a thing for us. I've always wanted to have this conversation with someone other than you two, because like-minded people, and I couldn't be more excited.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's topic is religion and combat, and it's a huge topic. It's a lifelong of planet Earth topic. It's been around from the beginning, so it'll be pretty deep today, as deep as we can get it.
One of the greatest motivators of combat, one of the greatest platforms for combat historically has been religion, right? There's one of the oldest sayings is there's no atheist in a foxhole,
right? Just imagine all the conflict around the world and throughout history that has derived from religious differences.
Absolutely.
But today we got a special guest. You're right. This is a great opportunity. I'd like to introduce Adam Mathis. Sir, you don't mind? Please let us know your backdrop.
Yeah, sure. My name is Adam Mathis. I served as a active duty platoon commander with 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines from 2004 to 2008. During that time, I led Marines in combat as platoon commander during the Second Battle of Fallujah. That was the big notable one. About 6 months later, returned as the executive officer of the company in Haditha. And then about a year after that, returned as the executive officer of weapons company during the surge. After those 3 deployments, I left active duty, joined the reserves for a while, and started pursuing a different life, pursuing a call, what I understood to be a call into ministry. So I went to seminary at Emory University, pursued ordination in the Methodist Church in the North Georgia Conference, and transitioned from the Reserve Marines to the Reserve Navy to serve as a Navy Chaplain. Served as a Navy Chaplain in the reserves for 6 years, a couple of years in training, 2 years in service to 6th Fleet, where I got to support sailors over in Europe. I got to serve underway as a chaplain for 8 weeks, which is pretty significant for a reserve chaplain. And I was really excited to have that opportunity. And then came back from that and was assigned to Coastal Riverine Group 2, which is East Coast Riverines, and they were taking on a coastal mission at that time as well.
Wow.
A couple years into that, I realized that I really enjoyed being a chaplain, and I was able to contribute in some modest way, but my heart was still with the Marine Infantry. So the Reserve Center had this little recruiting station. I used to drop in on the prior service recruiter, this guy named Sergeant Ski. And I'd walk in, like, "Hey, chaps," and I'd say, "Hey, Sergeant Ski, what do you got for me?" And he'd pull up the available BIC list and see what infantry officer, 03 infantry officer BICs were available. And he'd say, "Are you serious?" And I was like, "Nah, I'm just kind of missing it." And this would go on for several months. And then one day I just walked in and I was like, "Sergeant Ski, what you got for me?" And he pulled something up and I said something like, "Can we make it happen?" He said, "For real?" So yeah, let's see what it is. And it turns out there is a way to go back. So I had 2 inter-service transfers, active duty Marines or Reserve Marines to Navy Reserve, and then back to the Reserve Marines. And so from 2016 to present, I've been a Reserve Marine again.
Holding on to the dream.
Served with, right. Right. It felt really good to get back in the Marine uniform. So I served with light armored recon, went back to LAR, and then for a couple years, and then a couple years with 4th Recon, Bravo Company 4th Recon. And now I support the recruiting station here in Atlanta.
Awesome.
Outstanding.
Wow, amazing. A few things I do need to identify for the audience. In the spectrum of conflict, one of the first battles that he was talking about, Phantom Fury, it's what's called Block 3 combat. So you're actually engaging known enemy that are entrenched, that are barricaded in. It's the hardest fight that the Marine Corps has had in Iraq. That and Ramadi. The next one would be Haditha, and there was a lot of critical, bigger picture things happening there on the strategic level. Just a bad place. And then he came back for the surge, which ended up, like, I guess, being successful and winning our cause over there. So in the big spectrum, he's pretty much seen it all. Death, destruction, and mayhem across the board, and he still comes back. But along there's a moral compass, and that's why we invited him in today.
Yeah, amazing guest. You know, thank you for the intro. That's just inspiring and honestly motivates other people too to be like, hey, maybe there's still a chance to go back and I think about it all the time. So yeah, one of the topics of no atheists in the battlefield, and some of the topics that come up a lot of time in my mind, the psychological moment of when you accept that things are about to become non-human, meaning like you get motivated and you're like, I'm going to charge the hill and I'm going to whatever inspires you and motivates you. If it's death, we have skulls on everything, and we become very one with death, right? We, whether it's in the music or whatever it is, we spray paint stuff on gear, and we paint our faces. Like I remember in 2003 in the invasion, getting yelled at by a sergeant major I haven't seen in 4 weeks, hasn't fed me or given me resupply, but had the time to come up and yell at me because I had a skull painted on my face. I'm thinking to myself, that fear factor or that initial shock is what the enemy needs that causes hesitation. Hesitation kills. It gives me a chance. But then there's that moment, when the gig is up, and your hands have blood on them, and your breathing is getting labored, and you're about to fade out. And whether you call for mom or whether you call for God or whether you call for whoever you call for, begging for mercy or time or peace or something, whatever it is, it seems like everybody then now suddenly in that very moment believes in a higher being, and the ones that absolutely were atheists or anything of the sort, they suddenly become in that very last second, like, shit, I'm out of time, and they're reaching out. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that or seen something like that.
Well, so let me ask you, when you're getting ready to push, let's say, into Fallujah, what is your mindset? And I guess our main question is, can you be a Christian? Can you be a religious, God-fearing person and still be a successful can you be a successful warrior and a Christian? Can you be a successful warrior and a God-fearing person that worries about going to heaven when you die? And people like me that I grew up Catholic, and I know the 10 Commandments, and one of them is thou shalt not kill. Is there thou shalt not kill unless ... or is it, all right, you've made the decision to put your country over your religion, and you are doomed for a lifetime of living or not living with that decision?
Like a purgatory.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a good question. It may not be that black and white. One of the things that I think leads people to understand, or to the expression, there's no atheist in a foxhole, is that faith has something to do with the incomprehensible God, right? And the reality of God as incomprehensible. Combat brings you face to face with that. You don't know any moment whether running across the street you'll be running into eternity, or if you'll even have any awareness of that. I remember I was blown up and hit by an IED once, and the thing that stood out of all the things that stand out in such a moment, one of them that stood out was that it happened faster than my awareness could keep up. Right? I found myself being head hitting this was a canvas roof of a Humvee 2004 with little metal doors that we had to hold onto because they wouldn't latch. Right? And so I just found myself screaming and being thrown about, and I realized, oh, we must have hit an IED. It happened before I knew it, right? And so that sense of incomprehensible, or the incomprehensibility of the future and of how things shape up in combat is real. And so once you're confronted by that, it's easy to give it a name, right? So God takes some sort of shape when you are confronted with the incomprehensible, the limits of life, that which you have no understanding of. And that is also God. We don't have understanding of God except for what's been revealed in Scripture or through other revelation in the traditions. So to ask whether one can be Christian and a killer, I think yes. The answer is yes. It happens. The Roman centurion in the New Testament, was a model of faith for Jesus. So it's yes, but I think that we could think about the question differently and less doctrinally. I don't think that we can look for a list of rules that say, do this and you get that. When we get into the arena of faith, life gets real. There's nothing in life that's excluded from Scripture when you read it cover to cover. You have suicide, you have murder, you have betrayal. The very model of a life well lived ends in crucifixion, gruesome public torture after betrayal by one's closest friend. Everything about, I'm going to be speaking about Christianity because that's what I know. But everything about Christianity is real life. There's no fairy dusting in it, and it addresses the hardest things. And so it's helpful to look for harder answers than just what can be given in doctrinal responses to simple questions. Does that help? Or does that answer the question at all?
It leads us down a path, definitely, and I love that. Thank you for that insight. For that moment when you did get blown up, I feel like everybody at this table has had that moment where I guess you embrace, like, you might not make it. Your own mortality is now on the line, but you can almost operate better knowing that. Like, hey, there's going to be people around you that are going to get hurt. There's people around you that are going to die. In your context, you started out as that leader for an entire platoon. How did you go forward, and where in that lineage did you, I guess, start formulating this path for yourself? Or is it something you have to look back on and connect the dots?
Yeah, good question. I think that when I think about going into Fallujah, it started like the night before the morning of, or 48 hours or something before we actually crossed the line of departure. You can't think about those things. One of the things I found was I couldn't think about feelings. I couldn't think reflectively, and I'm typically a reflective person. I had to only think about the mission, and I had to think about the nuts and bolts of the mission. And if I wanted to think outside of the mission, I had to think about how to encourage Marines who might find themselves thinking. And when you're a leader, you typically have enough on your mind to be able to avoid indulging speculation or feelings. But I can imagine if you're riflemen in Fire Team 3, Squad 2, you may find boredom in that moment, and you have something to think about, like, am I going to live through this? And it can get scary. So for me, what my experience of Fallujah was, I didn't feel anything, and that was scary. I felt like something very urgent had to happen all the time, and I had to attend to everything all at once, but I didn't have time to think about it or feel it. And so one way to talk about that is I trusted my training. The training's really good. And once you fall into that training, you're capable. The training equips you to be capable and to surmount insurmountable obstacles and to realize that you have to give it all the time. But I couldn't think about it.
I'd love to. You. I don't know if it was captured. It definitely was for me. I just went head to toe goosebumps on behalf of John. John, would you like your goosebumps? John, in a previous podcast, I believe Memorial Day podcast, talked about a moment where there was a battle and his Marines were praying, and if you could. I'm summarizing in his story, so I apologize. But if you can think of like Black Hawk Down, when at the very end, when he was just eating quick to go back out, and he's like, "You're going back out." John basically came into his folks praying, and it's like it's not time for that. It's time to work, and he deals with that, and you talked about. Briefly about like, hey, it's so black and white, life and death, everything mattered in the very moment. You're a Christian. That's there. That's the DNA footprint in you. So, you've made peace with God, but in this moment, it's time to work, and that doesn't detract from prayer. It doesn't mean I'm in a firefight, I'm going to put my weapon down and pray that, the Good Samaritan comes by and saves me type of thing. I'm an instrument. I try not to exploit the concept of going down the path of crusades or anything like that, but I'm being an instrument of God at this point, because whether we're there politically, it's a religion war elsewhere. It's a religious war, for the most part, and it's time to work. In that moment, it's time to go to work. And there's something to be said about that. I say my prayers. At night, I thank him while laying on the dirt, or if I was lucky enough to have a cot or something, thanks for squeaking me through that one today.
Right.
Or we're getting ready to step off on. I was a scout sniper in Ramadi, and it didn't matter if you're a scout sniper or a cook, out there in Anabar province. It didn't matter because you're in the triangle of death. You're in the harm's way. So. To know that you're going to step off that day, that night, whatever you're doing, and you definitely have to give it up to God. You're like, okay, now just like you said, it's time to rely on your training. Yes, I have God in my corner. He's in my little pocket, and it's time to work,
We foolishly, not foolishly, I've never given a military style class. I've worked with him a lot giving classes, and I try to get away from this, but I say tool for your toolbox way too many times.
Yeah.
Right. But I would imagine, sir, that your religion was a tool in your toolbox. It was packed with you at all time, and did that make your pack heavier? Did you have an extra burden? You had the burden of being in command of infantrymen, which is a burden that I can't even really comprehend. I'm an enlisted guy, and to add burden in any, if you're fighting with your wife, or I remember I have 4 children. 2 of my kids were born when I was in combat. That was a burden that I'd rather not have had, but I'm very happy to, obviously, I'm happy to have it. I know I am not asking you if your religion was a burden. What I'm asking you was your faith, in your deep understanding of your faith, did that slow you or did that quicken you in any kind of combative thinking? And were decisions made? I know you didn't. I don't imagine you opened the Bible and said, "Okay, this. I'm going to use this verse to push forward with this operation." But you have that knowledge in you, and I'll keep saying, having that knowledge. How did that affect you in combat as a leader and as a trigger puller at times?
So I'll tell you, I did not have the knowledge. I was raised Christian, but I like to think of it as I wasn't really practicing or observant. I was nominally and culturally Christian. I had some orientation to the faith, but I was not biblically literate. I hadn't read anything theologically, and in fact, having when I got out, that was one of the reasons I wanted to get out, was I wanted to learn a new vocabulary, a new way of living. And that led me into graduate school. And I just finished 7 years of PhD work in historical theology, in part to build a vocabulary to understand my life, right? To try to understand the incomprehensible as real. So I did not know a whole lot going into Fallujah. I think that the groundwork of faith enabled me to do hard work because I didn't feel the burden to have to know or control everything. And that's also something they give you in training. You need to do everything you can, but you also have to surrender what you can't. If you can't control it, you shouldn't give it emotional energy.
I like that.
Wow. It's like, cut and paste that in everybody's life.
I'm stealing that.
Yeah,
Sir. I'm stealing that.
Steal it. Going into Fallujah, I was plussed up. So an organic rifle platoon, about 40 Marines, and we got plussed up with a section of tanks, 2 tanks, a section of tracks, so 2 tracks. I had a sniper team. We had attachments from weapons company. We had assaultmen and machine gunners, and I had Navy SEALs, a whole SEAL team for 2 days. Reporting to me as second lieutenant, right? I had no idea how to use them. I had the battalion XO riding along. I had PSYOPs. I got plussed up to 81 personnel in urban combat. And so, I realized if I don't know how to use this resource, then it's a waste, and I'm not leveraging the strength of the American military in the moment. So I had to know a whole lot, right? And I didn't know everything. I had to ask the SEALs, what do I do with you guys? Right, and they were great. They just said, treat us like a squad. If you need us like a squad, we'll be a squad. If you need us as snipers, we'll be snipers. But the thing I learned from that was, you have these resources, right? You have your toolbox. These are the tools in your toolbox to execute the mission through 11 days of combat on urban terrain. Coming out of that, I realized not every problem you experience can be treated kinetically or solved kinetically. Right? You can't blow up debt. You can't call the SEALs in when you have a relationship problem in your life. There are things internal and external.
I screwed that up.
Kinetically, but I didn't. Yeah, I didn't know all that though, and I did not. I'll also say I did not chart my course either. It was really given. I'd be happy to talk about how I think it was given instead of seized or taken. I never saw myself going into ministry. I never saw myself studying religion. I saw myself being in uniform and being the best officer I could be for my entire career, active duty.
Is there a correlation, or was there a correlation between, you were describing that your 80-man detachment, or the 80 men you went to combat with, which for people who don't know, that is the most destructive group of human beings on Earth in the history of combat.
Yeah. With air support. Right. And yeah.
Right. So I would say, oh, you had the hand of God. Now, saying it to you makes you feel like an asshole, but I would say that, and people would understand what I'm talking about. Did having that power help you make that decision to move into ministry?
No. I'll tell you what it is. I mean, it's not the powerful thing. It's the still small voice, right? And when Elijah was running in fear for his life, and he hid in a cave, God was not in the whirlwind. And God was not in the loud, big, powerful things. It was in a still small voice that gave him encouragement. No, the 80 personnel and warfighters who were with me, that feels good. You're not going into this alone. It was a heavy responsibility, but you're going into a fight with a bunch of your friends, and they're pretty mean and nasty, and that's great. And so that was good. But I'll tell you, I got a letter from a step grandmother, and she told me that when she was a little girl, when she got scared, she would say to herself, "I stand in the clear white light of the Christ, and no harm will come to me." And for whatever reason, that became a mantra for me. And so even with tanks, tracks, and everything else, running across an intersection that's beaten by small arms fire, I would say that to myself, and I would even like kind of see it, and I would feel like I could keep going in the very small moment.
That's the answer to your question of
Yes, sir,
did
it
it
is. Yes, sir, it
did
is.
having God in your pocket, if you will, inhibit or enhance your capabilities? And it obviously sounds like it enhanced.
Right, it enabled it for sure. But what I said was scary about not feeling anything. This was an interesting story. John Jacobs was the second platoon commander, peer, and he said something that stuck in my mind. So after the battle, we had to go back through and like patrol through different streets, and there was a dead cow. Like a cow got killed somehow in the battle, and over time, a litter of puppies grew up in the cadaver, right? Like almost like Star Wars, or in the cadaver of the cow. And he came back from patrol once, and everybody knew where the cow was, but he came back from patrol once, and he said something about, he saw these puppies. There was also a dead human laying around it too, but the puppies had left the cow and were eating the person, right? They were sitting on that person's face and like eating the chest cavity. And I remember thinking, wow, that's you're not going to see that every day.
Yeah.
But as I reflected on not feeling anything in combat, I thought, that was actually how I felt. I felt like, there was this puppy sitting on my face eating my heart, that I was capable, and I felt like that. And it wasn't until like 3 or 4 years later when I shared that story with the chaplain that she said that she was taken aback, and she said how sad, because that's where God lives. God lives in your heart. And so I felt, even as I could say a little mantra and feel the presence of God providing security, I also felt removed from God.
Two things real quick. Just an admin note. John Jacobs, was he a Mustanger? Was he enlisted prior?
Yes.
Yeah, him and I were in fast company together. Great stud. Missing a tooth from rugby, I believe, but great dude and great person to go to war with for sure. Yeah, the heart piece. As I sit here with goosebumps, how many times in life do we feel the black hole of emptiness? One, because we've seen the real world, whatever that may be, the ugliness of it, and now we're back in society, and we feel disconnected and all that stuff. And in my path that I see with our generation stuff, it's all the I'll see in Valhalla and all that romanticism of what they think a warrior path should be, and if you date ourselves, we think of like Conan, and stuff like that, and Rambo and different things. But I did grow up Christian. I grew up Lutheran. Went to church every Sunday. Went to private school, elementary. A little, forgive me, God, but a little hiccup, and went to public middle school. But then, Dad scooped me up and put me in private high school and stuff. So I had a very solid upbringing in Christianity, but I was also different from the other kids in the fact that I felt worldly already, even though I was, a small town, Wisconsin, a little bit, meaning, I was a bit homeless here and there, just like living on a friend's couch and stuff as a kid, and just different concepts. So that little voice, right, to give you inner strength and peace or drive and stuff like that, instead of diving into the darkness, was there due to the private school upbringing. And these days, all these veterans that are struggling and stuff, I'm like, just give God a try. It's like you put all this romanticism in these other concepts, that have no fruit at the end of the tunnel type of thing, and no hope, right? The hope of like, okay, I get pushed off into a raft on fire, and but it's not a real dream, and for me, I'm like, the Samson, the King David, battling the Philistines, and just all of that war, and they come back and they still honor God, and they still go to heaven, and not only do they go to heaven, but God has a special place for them in heaven, and that is the answer to your original question for me is God does talk about protecting his people, and it's not made for us to completely understand, right? It's right. Godly. It's not humanly, so to understand that I'm not going to fully understand it. I did drink the Kool-Aid, if you will, of like, okay, I'm going to war. And like I was talking earlier, the pre-killing, of like, I'm going to war. Yes, I had skulls on my crap and stuff like that, and listen to whatever crazy rock or metal music and stuff. But then I was also very in the back of my mind, I'm doing God's work, and I'm not going to hesitation kills, so I'm all in, full in, However, on the back end of that, once you do have blood on your hands, you have to come to peace with it. And I feel like I've always there's been like one or two little things that I struggle with on a human level, but on a thinking godly, I'm at peace with it.
Right.
My only nightmares are the ones that got away, and that's not because I'm like, oh, death, death, death. It's because I'm 100% at peace with fighting the enemy. I do struggle at times of the Good Samaritan I should turn the cheek, and stuff, and but then I also refer back to Bible stories of like, Samson prayed to God, and get the strength, or King David, and just some of these stories. I'm like, no, you can do both. You can,
No pun intended. It's what lens you're looking for.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. I can grab a jawbone and clear a house.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, war is not the way of faith, right? But you can have faith in war. So
I like that.
Yeah,
one of the conflicts I hear you saying is it would not be accurate to say that the Bible is telling us to go to war, and in going to war, that is how we see the face of God. It's that life is immense, and it includes war, and even in the depths of war, it is still possible, and it's still necessary to have faith. And if you lose it, you despair. And despair means being without hope. And that's a really terrible place to be.
It is really.
What does faith in combat and faith as a IT professional for Microsoft, what is the difference in that? If someone came knocking on your door and say, hey, Chaplain, I am everyone in this room here are infantry guys. Me and Tim worked for a little bit smaller units. I worked for an aggressing unit, so a lot of times, morally, you could say, deadly force justified under extreme necessity as a last resort where other means have failed, cannot really be employed, right? My job was I went and looked for people and killed them. I was the aggressor, and so I made a different type of decision. And I took from people, and it was my decision. I hunted them, and I found them, and I reported on them, and in some cases I killed them. What is that? How? So if I knocked on your door and said, "Please explain, Chaplain, explain to me how I'm going to heaven," because I'm worried about this. After my first time I ever took that shot was maybe 2004. I remember I got back to to our little compound, and I said, "Oh shit, this might be it." I decided and killed a person today.
Judge, jury,
or this
executioner.
Week,
yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't in self-defense, and it wasn't either him or me. It was him or me or him next day. Right. I decided when to kill him.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie, sir. I didn't lose a huge amount of sleep. Well, but I did. I had that internal conversation many times, saying, "Wow, I took that step, and I will never be able to step back." And how does that? And now my faith is unwavering. I am very confident in my God. I'm very confident in what happens with, when I pray and stuff. I don't get into asking for favors because I don't believe that I deserve them. So I don't know if I guess my original question was, what is the difference between how I celebrate my faith and how someone that has no combat experience celebrates their faith, and can there be correlation, or is it got to be completely different set of rules?
Not completely different set of rules. I'll give you a paradox, because when you enter the conversation of faith, most things are both and sometimes contradictory. So faith, I think, is both universal because we share it in a community. It's supposed to be shared in and among other people. Not one person has the full vision of God. It's something that we learn from one another. And at the same time, one's faith is incredibly peculiar to oneself. So no two paths are the same, and no one's encounter or the way they make sense of that encounter with God is the same. So it's both universal and peculiar. That's one stab at it, but I think it also has something to do with how bad you need it, right? So I said I was nominally Christian, and I made it all the way to my third deployment before I decided that I couldn't do it myself anymore and I actually needed help. And I tried everything short of authentically praying for help. And that included some pretty significant things. I mean, so after Haditha, I got caught up in a lot of legal stuff, a lot of political stuff. There was investigations that went all the way up to the Secretary of Defense. We were basically accused of, a lot of Marines were accused of war crimes or suspected of it, right? And it was this huge betrayal, this huge sense of, what are you talking about? You trained us to do this and this sort of thing. But it was also had political, theater involved. But I mean, I remember I once emailed like president at whitehouse.gov, like looking for help. And I had a few people help. A chaplain came, and that's when I realized, if the president doesn't answer the email, which why would he? I need to pray to God, right? Like I have learned enough in life that when you need help, the person you call on is Jesus, the name of Jesus. And I did. And like suddenly this chaplain came and he prayed for me because I had lost the words for it. And in praying for me, I found the words. I remembered the words because I was raised with those words. I had a phenomenal company commander. His name's Chris Haney. He stuck with me when I did not deserve to be stuck with. I had become a bad officer. I was cynical. I was just angry, and even I could see my friends just not want to be around me. The other platoon commanders, and I was the XO of the company, but my company commander stood with me. And then Jim Mattis, of all people, Jim Mattis. I requested Mass for his eyes only to talk about my predicament, and he was out visiting the MEU. He had like 4 hours, from what I understood, with the entire MEU, and he spent an hour knee to knee with me in this bombed out building talking about my problem. And actually, that's not accurate. He talked about it for 1 minute. And he said, "I'm grateful that you reached out to talk to me because I'm not happy with the way this is going, and we're going to take care of it." And then immediately pivoted to, "Let's talk about what you're going through," and then got an hour of mentorship from Jim Mattis. But that was when I called on the name of the Lord, and that's when I received help, and that's when I started saying, I have this habit of cynicism, and I don't have to have it anymore. I'm going on a tangent, and I can't really remember what the question was.
Let me interject real quick just for conversations. I think that my combat experience actually made me challenge my perception of organized religion. Grew up, got confirmed. I looked at it once I came back. My mother, who was my moral compass, I always looked at it like it was almost a set way to keep me in line. I'd be in trouble if I fought other kids. If I swore, I'd be in trouble, and it was all going back to that backdrop of religion. I came back and my mom wanted to see pictures of dead insurgents. And right away I was like, well, wait a minute. I was just getting in trouble for swearing before.
Right.
And now I'm elevated to this absolute hero. And you want to see that. And it just didn't make sense to me at all. But while I was in combat, I do have to annotate this. When I should have been afraid, I felt like there was a guardian angel there. Like
You're at
there's
peace.
legitimate
Yeah.
times where I was like, you should be scared shitless right now. But I wasn't. It was like almost like a confidence.
Yeah.
But like you had identified earlier, when I did think about it, then I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that.
Right.
What do you think about that? Like when you say that he came and prayed for you, is there any correlation there with like what I'm thinking? Like I question organized religion.
100%. And I think the questioning has to do with who's acting on whose behalf. So the whole, I mean, grace is that which is done for you. And faith is, I think, a product of grace. If you haven't read it, read St. Augustine's Confessions. Before you die, read it. It will sound remarkably modern, even though it was written 397 to 400 AD. It sounds modern because he's remembering his life and he sees that even though he was pursuing a selfish ambition, that God was using it to bring him closer to himself. And so one of the things that goes back to John's question, one of the things Augustine lands on is there's nothing I can do to earn salvation. There's nothing I did. In fact, Augustine says, no, I chose wrong and I knew it, which was a big deal that he said that because of the other philosophical currents at the time. For instance, Platonism, you do the good you know. So if you know it, you do it. And you're acting unreasonably, which is a whole different category if you do something you know to be wrong. But Augustine says, no, I knew it was wrong and I did it anyway. And yet God redeemed that and used that to bring me closer to him. And without my choice to do wrong, I would never have been brought closer to him. And so there's this paradox that I'm never going to get in front of God. I can't turn towards him without him already have turned towards me. I'm sorry, the question you asked about, can I be Christian having killed someone?
Right.
The whole point of the faith is that there is nothing that can separate you from his love. Nothing. And Jesus...
Say again what you said about you do the good you know. What?
So that was classical Platonic philosophy, just how people think and ethics that come out of it, that if you know it, then you're going to do it. If you know that it's good, you do it.
Does that apply to evil? You do the evil you know? If you're doing evil things that you don't understand are evil,
No, I think...
Are you morally wrong?
I'm not sure that Plato had the way of talking about that, or if it is, I'm not familiar. I'm thinking of his epistemology, which is basically like reason governs is the charioteer.
Okay.
Right? So the reason is driving two horses. One of them is passions, the other ones are appetites. And so with the horse running away with the cart is, say you do something that goes against reason, like, hey, I'm married and the good thing to do is to stay faithful. But then your lust kicks in and you end up having an affair. That would be the horse running away with the cart. Plato would say that was not you acting on it. It was so Augustine was advancing that, saying, no, actually it was. Right. It was me doing it. And I knew I was doing it. And so he was critiquing something of Platonic philosophy. But the point is also that even in our knowing and in our unknowing, we're reliant upon that which has to be done for us, that we can't do it ourselves. We can't lift the rock we're standing on. The human condition is a predicament, right? The evil is within us. We hold the potential to do good and bad. Every action we take has a consequence. Every light casts a shadow. And even when and Immanuel Kant had an awesome observation that I wish would be remembered more in our current day. The radical evil prevails when we think we're doing best. In the moment when we think we're doing what's right, radical evil can result. So it's good to be humble about what the human being can do for itself, or the person rather can do for his or herself.
So I just want to throw this in there. I've talked to Mick recently about this profound feeling I've had one time. I was in Afghanistan, and I worked in a very small unit. I was out by myself, and I wasn't by myself, but I was at the time by myself. And I got this fuzzy, warm feeling that kind of rained down on me. And I thought to myself, I might be the most dangerous human being to ever stand here on this land, which is kind of a ridiculous thing to think, but I truly felt that. I just had that same feeling. I feel 100 pounds lighter right now after hearing a few things you said, and I'm not blowing smoke in your ass. I feel I feel like I understand things that I've thought about since I was 10 years old. And I just want to let you know how much I appreciate it,
Yeah.
but it takes a very special human being to be able to explain to my dumb ass, but I don't imagine you picked the phone up today to talk to us thinking that you're going to change any of our lives, and I feel different right now than I did 10 minutes ago and a half hour ago, an hour ago, and I like this feeling very much, and I feel very. I get this warm feeling again. So and I had to interrupt and say it because I didn't want to have to miss this moment. It's a pretty cool thing.
That's
it's clarity which I didn't think I needed, and I didn't really think existed, and I now have.
That's even the best part. You weren't expecting it. And he did that.
And I wasn't looking for it either.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything. Here's something. So faith. My professor David Piccini put it this way, and I felt like it was very good. Faith is that felt sense of belonging to an incomprehensible God. Like you feel a sense of belonging. That's the forgiveness and that sense of I belong to an incomprehensible God. I'm not cut off from that, right? Because that's a terrible place to be cut off from God. That's when a puppy's eating your heart, right? And you're a cadaver on the side of the street in Fallujah, where you don't have feeling anymore because you've descended below the depths of human experience. But then the warmth that overcomes you is that felt sense of belonging that's given to you. You can't do anything to earn that belonging. You've been belonged, right? God belongs. You belong to God, and He's doing that for you, and then you feel it. But it's also incomprehensible,
Right.
So it's a confession that you can't know it either.
To look at all of your life and your situations from human eyes, I mean, you're born in death. You're born in sin, and there's nothing you can do about it. To look at it, and you can't do this, but to look at it from the Bible side or look at it from God's perspective of like, hey, knucklehead, it's like, I got you. Just put faith in me, and let it go. Give it to me. I'll carry the pack. We're so busy carrying the pack and proving ourselves, and God's like, you can never carry the pack, I think of footprints all the time, and I was raised Lutheran, stepdad was Catholic type of thing, so there's some overlap, but honestly, the concept of footprints, that's what I'm in combat, and I'm thinking, may God's will be done, and if that means today is my day, today is my day, but I'm gonna do my life to the best of my ability on behalf of my men, and on behalf of, the underdog in that country, being violated or whatever reason that I can come up with. It's sinful. It's for my glory. It's for my selfish purposes. But I give it to God, and knowing that asking for forgiveness and asking Him to guide my way and stuff, and trying to do things morally and ethically, because you are the judge, jury, executioner out there, and you are, it is deadly force, because like you said, this person has met criteria that, okay, has intent, and that intent you're nipping in the bud, right. But still,
You or him.
yeah, it's you or him. But I know that when I was doing that, I wasn't carving anything in my stock or anything like that.
Right.
But I also was like, good day out, good day at work today, and that's not what God wants either. So the sinful portion of it, we're human. We're going to screw it up every moment of every single day. But giving it to God and asking Him for the guidance and whatnot, and we can never understand that pathway. We have to be the two morons on the cross next to Jesus going, I'm an idiot. I found myself on a cross next to God Himself, the Son. Please forgive me, and giving it to Him. And no matter what we do, we're going to be the idiots, next to Jesus on the cross,
It's a good Lutheran perspective. Yeah. And actually, John, if I can share with you, Psalm 147, 10 and 11, He does not delight in the strength of the horse. He does not take pleasure in the legs of a man. The Lord favors those who fear Him, those who wait for His loving kindness. But the good Lutheran in Tim says that you're both a sinner and a saint at once. That from God's perspective, you're a sinner. You haven't changed one iota, but you're covered in the blood of Christ. And so when God looks down on you, he sees the blood of Christ and not you. Simul justus et peccator est. You're simultaneously a sinner and a saint.
Aha moments.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't. I've gone to church very little since coming home, and I tried to put my kids through private school a bit, and and that worked for a while. But I struggle setting foot into church because I'll break down, but I'll pray at home and stuff like that, and it's tough. It's tough to understand that God, loves me, but I know it doctrinally. I understand that, but yeah, it's tough stuff.
Adam, bringing it back to you, go into depth if you can, or briefly, doesn't matter, the Haditha scenario and why you were in such a low place, like you were disenfranchised with the Marine Corps as an organization. Where were you at during that time?
Ooh, that was really bad. So, Fallujah, the story for me was humility and then gaining confidence. Like that, having lived through it and led Marines in combat, that I got pretty confident, right? Going back to Haditha, I was starting to have fun. It was confidence, but we also kept maybe a third of the Marines who were in Fallujah with us, and then we got plussed up with these guys from 1-4 who were in Najaf, and then we had some new Marines who were just really talented and stellar, and we had this awesome company. And we went into Haditha, and we really felt like we were doing things right, and we were firing on all cylinders, and had great cohesion among the officers, and good, strong bonds with the Marines. And it was fun. The Haditha was a nasty, nasty place, though. It was secretive. So if Fallujah was all out, right, everyone's coming to the streets and fighting. Haditha, they went underground, and they buried bombs deep and put accelerant in them. And an IED would completely vaporize a Humvee, whereas before it would just take out a tire and it could kill you, but it was not as you wouldn't be liquid afterwards. And things got really nasty, and it was secretive and hidden. So in Haditha, one morning in November 2005, I think it was maybe the security platoon sent a squad down to a combat outpost to resupply batteries, water, chow, stuff like this. Came back to the firm base in the center of town by a different route, and on the way back, the third Humvee, a line of 4, blew up, and the Marines reported receiving fire afterwards, and then it's the fog of battle. That happened at like 7:30 in the morning, and then all throughout the city there was conflict. We had people shooting here and there. We had Marines covering down on IEDs and small arms fire here and there. And it was this huge thing. And then and we were chasing people using UAVs, and I had a platoon commander, John Zoll, injured by a grenade, and we had to evacuate him. When we evacuated him, we had Delta Force fly in because they thought that Zarqawi was in town, right? Like, and this is me being like I was a first lieutenant. I'm a first lieutenant now, and I've worked with SEALs, but now it's like, goodness gracious, what is going on here, right? And so these guys come in, and they're like, well, his mom, Zarqawi's mom, has a house here, and we think he's orchestrating all of this. And they went and did a hit. He wasn't there, but the house was like right across from our firm base, and we didn't know it. But in the result, at the end of all of that, there were more bodies that came back to the firm base than what was reported on the radio. And so I tried to clear that up, and made a report to battalion. It's like, hey, this is like 15 and 8 instead of 8 and 15. 15 plus 8 instead of 15, 8 of which were known EKIA, enemy killed in action. And so we had 24 bodies show up in these Humvees, and the Marines had cleaned it up. And so more people died than was expected. And so I had to clarify some reports and what's going on. Company commander took care of one side of it. I helped with the cleanup. And then when we had Marines out in the Ville, we had Marines killed. We had officers injured and evacuated, and it was a big, big day of combat. It was the biggest one so far for that deployment for us. Things seemed to calm down. That was a big incident, but we pressed forward. We ended up having the constitutional referendum elections. It was peaceful. The city seemed to stabilize. they started stringing up volleyball nets in the road. I didn't even know that was a thing, but in Haditha they like to play volleyball, in the afternoon, and so they would put nets up, and we enjoyed something of peace during that time. Then January 2006, which started an election season. There were other inquiries about what happened, and it looked like information operations from the Iraqi side. Some organization called Hammurabi Human Rights said that these Marines who were biological brothers, one of them was killed, and the other one went on a rampage and killed all these people in cold blood. And we're like, well, that's just not true. This is they're trying to paint the picture in a way that is not favorable, and it's not true. Well, they sent that to Time Magazine. Time Magazine wanted to come out and do a report on it, and we're like, yeah, fine. Like, we answered some questions in advance and said, come on out. Well, the reporter didn't ever come out. He was I think too afraid, because it was actually a combat zone, and he published something that was basically given to him by the Iraqis. Nowadays, we call it fake news, right? Like, because the Russians give us fake news and all this kind of stuff. Well, back then, the Iraqis did too, or those insurgents, wherever they came from. And so it sparked off this investigation that went on for, I think, 6 years. And it cast a very long shadow over the Marine Corps, because it was never really, the Marine who was finally prosecuted, 12 people were charged or more. It was terrible. And a lot of people died. That's a huge tragedy. A lot of people's careers ended. That's really sad too, because they were doing they were doing the mission, and it wasn't I was just following orders either. It was fog of war, making decisions, and people died. But in the end, there was no crime found. It's still murky, and honestly, I was running the Combat Operations Center at the time. I was the executive officer, so I was running the COC, running the radios between the field and the battalion, and coordinating assets and trying to move Marines to where the combat was. Company commander went out in the field where he needed to be, right where the action was, and so from a investigative point of view, I'm the one running the reports, and the reports were wrong. So they want to know, well, why are these reports wrong? And so, well, I rectified them directly with Battalion 3, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, at the end of the day, they felt they were accusing us, suspecting us, and sometimes charging us with dereliction of duty. And it was a huge feeling of betrayal. The entire Marine Corps closed ranks against us, and we were anathema. We went from being like the main effort for the battalion and celebrated for having a highly successful tour to 1 week later, battalion commander, company commander, platoon commander charged, relieved, and were treated like criminals. Legitimately treated like criminals, like not just criminals, but the worst, right? Like y'all killed civilians, women and children in cold blood. Like, what are you, right? And that was really the sense. There was really a sense of being outcast and stamped upon, and the whole Marine Corps and all of the virtues and the way of life that we enjoyed and that brought us up to be men, and to be men that were admirable, right? And we were pursuing this life that they had, the model that they had given us, right? And then doing it well in combat, and then saying, no, it's, you're nothing to me, you're garbage. All the way up to the Secretary of Defense. I guess they needed a scapegoat. I don't know. But it took a long time it took a long time to process, and it was really, really sad and angering.
Yeah.
And I became cynical. I bounced back for a little while. It's like, I'm going to trust the institution's going to work itself out. Let this play out. They're making the right decisions. And then you even come to learn, no, actually they're not. There is a tail that wags the dog, and the Department of Defense is still run by civilians who are political people.
Right.
So there's not a right that's going to process through this. It's going to shake out, and bad things are going to happen, and there will be people who are churned up, and you are a pawn. And so that was when I started realizing again, like Fallujah made me realize, wow, I'm literally a pawn on the chessboard, right? We're the front line platoon going down an assault. I took 50% casualties. We could be completely emaciated and have to be replaced, and that's combat. Welcome to it, right? You're going to deal with death. You're also going to deal with your life not being strategic. Your life has importance, but it's not strategic importance. Well, then you get into Haditha, and it's like, well, not only did you have to learn that your life isn't of really strategic importance, but neither is the rest of your life and the rest of your career. Neither are your hopes and dreams. Neither is any of this that we've said has ultimate importance. It doesn't. It does not have ultimate concern. It is not of ultimate concern, and you have to find a different place for it. As the Marine Corps, in its institutions and its language and its history and its heroes and its virtues and its camaraderie, that leads us not only to be willing to die, but to be willing to kill, right? And you're making a profound individual sacrifice by making that decision and following its lead. When then they say that, not only do you not belong in the Hall of Heroes, you don't belong to one of us. It hurts in a deep way.
It sounds like the Marine Corps has, and I'm thinking of several different stories that are similar to yours. The Marine Corps has strategic weight on your life in a negative way if they need the scapegoat, and I'm thinking of some very personal friends with the urination on the deceased bodies, even though their friends, were killed days prior, and just some of these scapegoats, and then 7 years later on a back page of a paper,
right.
they're exonerated or something, but
After he killed himself.
and
Drug through the mud too.
yeah, all that stuff, and their life has completely changed. The days of like the World War II, and we're gonna like parade these heroes and Medal of Honor recipients through town and
John
all that
Bastogne.
stuff. Yeah, those days seem to be over. It's more of the, hey, we're going to drag these names through the street in a negative way so that we can pull the attention off of, like you said, the political stuff. So, yeah, it's definitely a change of
though,
time.
it's not good to look back at World War II as if it was as clean as that. It wasn't. And one of the big things that I had to realize was it was wrong of me to place my hope in the Marine Corps. It wasn't wrong of the Marine. I mean, yeah, it was wrong of the Marine Corps. But when we talk about the Marine Corps, what is it? It's an institution. It's not a person. It's a bunch of individuals, and so it's compromised. It's fallen. It is a fallen institution, and I had treated it as if it was infallible, as if it had the authority and sanctity to give and take life, and it doesn't. So I had placed my heart on an altar, an idolatrous altar, and then guess what happens? Like, you sacrifice your life for it. It's blood sacrifice. So then I learned, okay, well, shame on me for putting my heart in an institution, right?
I never thought of it like that. That's a huge statement. And my daughter went through some stuff, and the Marine Corps completely failed her. And you exonerate, or you exalt, I should say, the Marine Corps, and that as a false idol type of thing. That's such a powerful thought.
Let me interject.
And it was.
Let me interject real quick. I know that we're running short on time, but I do need to identify some more things.
I need to shout out some chaps too.
You go through that, and then you volunteer to go back.
Yeah.
Tell me that. Like, why?
As I only wanted to be a Marine. That was it. And I felt like that was taken from me again because I had made an idol of it. And the Marine Corps, it's an institution. It's going to have its ups and downs. But then when I'm by name listed the people who provided good leadership and mentorship to me, Chris Haney, Jim Mattis, Alan Vaughn, these people are also the Marine Corps, and so I always missed it. But it took me years to realize that I was harboring unforgiveness, that I was unforgiving. I was sitting there expecting somebody from the Marine Corps to say, Adam, we looked into it. We're wrong. I'm sorry. We treated you like crap and treated you like a criminal. And it turns out maybe that wasn't the case. It wasn't clean. It was dirty. It was combat. But we're sorry we made you out to be a criminal. I was waiting for that. It's not going to happen, and it never did. I didn't see that I was also harboring unforgiveness and saying, I'm not going to forgive them, whatever that is, right? The Marine Corps, I hated it. I saw that I had tattoos on my body, and I thought, this is horrible. I've given my life to this thing that betrayed me. But then, I was a chaplain overseas on a ship somewhere in the Baltic Sea, and talking with a sailor who was in the religious program, was in the congregation. I was telling him the story, and I was like, when I joined, I aspired to be a general. I wanted to be the best officer I could be and to make it all the way. And it just didn't turn out that way. And I told him that story. of the surge, and he said, "Wait, so you wanted to be the commandant or a general, and when you had some trouble as a first lieutenant, General Mattis came and encouraged you?" I was like, "Yeah," and he said, "You think that was an accident?" I was like, "Whoa." I had never thought about it that way. Like, who else, right? I'm sitting there calling for help. Who else is going to come and help me? Who would I have respected it if it was President Bush? Would I have taken his word more over Jim Mattis's? Like, no. I got the help I needed. I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it. Now I listened to him and I said, I'll sleep on it. I'll stay in. He was saying you got to stay in because we need future leaders that have this experience. And he said, he went through it himself. He's had bad press things, and we need generals in the future who will face that, having had some experience with it, and not be the first time when they're wearing stars. So he said, "Don't choose cynicism." He gave his speech, which is just gold, and I couldn't hear it until like 7 years later. When I'm on a ship and I have a sailor telling me, you think maybe that was significant. That you had these dreams, and this person, the running joke was because my name sounds like it, right? People would say, "Oh, Lieutenant Mathis, are you General Mattis's son?" No, I'm not. No, you can walk by. I'm not important to you. You don't have to treat me like that. But
the inside joke
so I didn't see it.
That's kind of like a lisp, doesn't it? Like,
right, so it sounds the same. Yeah, it sounds a bit the same. And so here he is, this representation of who I could be, right? Saying stick in with it. I even thought about it later, being like, if you had a chance to go back and encourage yourself at a time of great consequence, where you're about to make a decision of great consequence, what would you say? And it's like, wow, that would have been the moment, right? Like, that would have been the moment. The person I wanted to be actually came and encouraged me when I had a fateful decision to make, and it shows otherwise. But in that time, I realized, man, I want to be a Marine. I can be a Marine again. I want to see what it takes if I can go back, because I also despaired that I would never be a combat leader of Marines again. I'm a chaplain. I will never lead Marines in combat again. I will never have that kind of responsibility. I will never have that thrill. And actually, I had immense suffering, and I wasn't worthy of it. I wished it away. I wished that I wasn't in this great trial of character building challenge, and I wished that I could run away from it and just be comfortable somewhere stateside in air conditioning. And I realized that I had forfeited a huge opportunity to grow as a man, and I wanted it back. And so actually, I got a chance to thank General Mattis, because I sent him a note and said, I couldn't hear what you were saying, but I'm immensely grateful for you taking that time to encourage me, and I just wanted to tell you thank you, because that was extraordinary.
He wrote back, didn't he?
Oh yeah, we've been in touch ever since.
Yeah.
And I have 4 kids also. My 4th son is named James after him. And actually, when he was sec def, he promoted me in his office, and I got to take my baby James up to his office, and there in the Pentagon, he promoted me to major. And then he's as good as they say.
Yeah. Did you say when you were becoming a chaplain of with Marines that you were afraid that you weren't going to lead Marines again, or did I mishear that?
Right. When I was a chaplain and I started realizing, that I'd made a decision away from the life I loved, I thought I would never have that responsibility again. But then, lo and behold.
Well, I wanted to shout out, so Chaplain DeConti, was my chaplain out in 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. And then we have Chaplain Huff, local chaplain, and 2 different lifestyles, So in war, seeing a chaplain, and during the invasion, we had communion on the side of the road. We had, just all kinds of stuff that you traditionally don't think of in combat, I guess, but I mean, straight up, church service real quick. Hey, all the vehicles are fueling up, and we're going to do a little church service. Everybody wants to meet at the back of this Humvee. But Chaplain DeConti, was instrumental in leading Marines in the real time, with that struggle. Anyone that was mature enough to feel like I'm out here killing people every single day. Ramadi in 2004, was just like the places you're talking about, and so the leading of Marines on a spiritual level, such a bigger concept than the platoon commander level. I mean, that man has done more for the warriors of that unit and dealing with the loss of their immediate teammates and stuff. And yeah, that thought, and I understand you've definitely grown out of that concept of chaplains leading Marines, but it's like that Chaplain DeConti definitely at the time was a pathway to hope, and a vessel of hope through prayer and through God, and to show the shiny light, if you will, the white light that you're talking about, and in the real time. And then, Chaplain Huff, I get out, of combat and all that stuff, and I come to Wisconsin, and I'm going through, a worldly, combat of divorce, right? Just the whole emotional combat of just, for me, it was the worst thing, worse than combat. It was just emotionally, type of thing. And Chaplain Huff, so out of combat, was there, and just the work of guiding Marines and giving them hope, understanding that our suicide rate is ridiculous, right? And the problem with us is that death is a dime a dozen. Like we've seen it and dealt it and held it in our hands throughout our career, and that's the problem, right? And it's not such a foreign concept because it was everyday life for a while, and to have these beacons of sinful people that are working in God's name to guide us is just, that is the ultimate platoon commander for me. I couldn't ask for anything more. Like our buddies here, we're all sitting here talking, but to listen to you talk today is definitely going to church. I'm counting this one as Sunday service and really appreciate it. So, thank you.
I say you're a rare and impressive man, sir, and and I'm sure you've heard it before. And if I ever talk to you again, you will hear it again from me. The Marine Corps is blessed to have people like you. I don't mean blessed as in a religious way. I mean, having people like you that have the perspective and insight is mandatory to be around warriors. And as a warrior and speaking for warriors, you are very much needed and very much appreciated. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate this conversation. But I promise you, people are going to hear this, and it's going to change the way they look at. I started this with saying, can you be a warrior and a Christian? Can you be a warrior religious? I think we should change the name of it, or change the title to, can you be a warrior without being a faithful person?
That's amazing. Yeah.
Can you go into combat without having faith? And I just appreciate you, sir. Thank you very much.
I speak on behalf of all of us. Thank you for your time, number one. Very insightful, very profound. If you would talk to some of Marines, I think that they felt you only knew the old 6-5, but boy, the depth level here is crazy. Definitely made an impact on all of us.
Oh, absolutely.
Here's your opportunity to talk to the audience. What would you say? Advice, insight, lifelong, because you've seen the entire spectrum, death, life, across the board. You're in a happy place, and there was an ebb and flow where you were not in a happy place. People around you have taken their lives. What would you say to our audience?
Don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. Look for it, and don't be afraid to call for it. Don't be afraid to ask for it. That requires real courage. It requires courage, which is a quality of the heart, to call on God for help. But the scripture shows, and the tradition illustrates and proves out, that when you have the courage to do that, it's a mighty wind that comes in, and you find yourself in a new place. And you won't always be able to talk about what happened, but you know that something did. And then look for a new way, a new song to sing. I found when I was despairing most, I had this current of negativity and cynicism running in my head, and it was put there and reinforced through habit. And I needed someone else to follow, and some other way of life, and some other song to sing. I needed a new vocabulary to break out of that. And it doesn't happen all at once. It's cultivated. It takes time. There are ups and downs. But don't lose hope. Call for it when you need it, and then put yourself in a community of like-minded people to help you along the way.
Moving.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and lastly, for this episode, I'd like to end with a prayer, and my version of that. Feel free to add on at the end is to really, bless all the people that hear this, and anyone that may come across it on any of the platforms. But I hope it takes the 100-pound weight out of your pack on a daily basis, and giving it to God is the best way to go. And really, I pray for peace, and peace on all levels. Like, people ask me what I want for Christmas, what I want for this. It's like, dear Lord Jesus, please give me peace in my heart. Peace on the planet, but peace internally. And then I also pray for the strength of our warriors out there to defend it in the best of their abilities, and to be safe out there. So thank you, and amen.